I'm going to show you how dynamic study modules, or DSMs, work by using a short module that is in fact about how DSMs work. So a few facts first. Each of your dynamic study modules is roughly 25 to 30 questions long. Those questions then are served to students in short rounds of 8 questions each, and that helps keep the learning interesting and motivating. DSMs are adaptive, so as students answer questions, the software adapts to how they've answered and presents students different questions based on the learning science that is behind the algorithm, all of the things that we know about how the brain works and how the brain learns to make learning more efficient and last longer, but also that we have quite a bit of motivation theory behind the algorithm as well. So the adaptivity in DSMs is a bit like a video game as well. It's designed to keep the student interested in staying in the learning much the way a video game adapts to help keep the player interested in the game. When students are in DSMs, they can leave at any time. They can pick up where they left off. All of the work that students do either in their desktop version or in the mobile app is recorded in your instructor DSM reporting suite. So anything that a student does in DSMs, you can see when you look at DSM reports. You don't necessarily have to assign to see student work. And the last thing too is modules take on average about 30 minutes to complete. So efficient learning in a very short time frame for your students. So DSMs assess a student's confidence level when the student answers the question. Simple way to do this. If I'm unsure, I click half of the circle, and if I'm sure, I click the full circle. So this question is asking about why do DSMs only show if we're right or wrong, but don't give us the answer when we first answer the question. You know what? I don't really know about that yet, so I'm just going to say I don't know yet to this one. And then how do dynamic study modules speed learning? I think that they might give some background information, but they might actually be adapting to prior knowledge. That is, if a student knows it when they come in, is that part of how they speed this up? Now, I'm being told that one of my answers is correct, and here, like the first question told us, I'm not told what the correct answer is yet. This question is about the mobile app, and I'm pretty sure that we just download the app and we get running. So I'm going to submit that answer. This answer I'm sure and incorrect. My next question, what is the difference between refresh and smart refresh? So I think I might have heard this somewhere, and I think that refresh is about presenting all of the learning units. So for this one, I'm going to say I'm unsure, but I do know that I got the answer correct, and so we'll see how this works later. So now I'm going to work through the next set of questions, answering confidently and correctly. And I'm doing that so that we can get through the demo a little bit more quickly, and we'll still talk about some of the features that DSMs have. So how often can students take those refreshers? The cool thing about DSMs is as soon as those refreshers are available, as soon as the students finish the module, those refreshers are always available to the student and they can take them as often as they want. So I get a congratulations that I've answered my first question. And in DSMs, answering a question confidently and correctly is how we achieve mastery. So answering that first question correctly, that tells me that that question has been mastered. And why do dynamic study modules assess a student's confidence? And we talked about this earlier. It's to create long-term memories. So as soon or when there's emotion or something at stake emotionally with an answer, that's when learning really starts to happen. We get some emotion going, that gets some dopamine going in the brain, and that's where we're starting to have a little bit of that notion of keeping students motivated like a video game does. So when Sarah has finished her dynamic study module, we talked about this earlier also. Oh, sorry, this is when we didn't. What she does is she reveals the module completion status, and that is right here with the drop-down arrow. So with this menu bar, we call it our heads-up display, students can get more information about their work in the study module. And so this we talked about before. If I need to save my progress in a dynamic study module, I don't have to do anything. Super easy for students to use. So we've finished our group, our round of 8 questions. And so now we're told not only what the correct answer is, but we have a what you need to know section. For Pearson, this what you need to know is really what is in the textbook or in other learning tools that your students have that is the information they need to answer the question correctly. So these are taken directly from the author and title that you're using, and you can almost think of them as breaking up the textbook and putting the textbook information right where the student needs it at the exact time that they need to know it. So in this particular case, we've learned that the correct answer for the app is that a student does have to open a DSM on their computer or in a mobile browser before actually going into the app. That's actually how the app knows who the student is and what course they're in. So on this question, so speeding learning is really about adapting to prior knowledge. So we're going to see here in a minute that one of the reasons dynamic study modules are efficient is if I've mastered a concept or I know a concept coming in, I don't need to see that question again. And so we start to streamline and get to fewer and fewer questions towards the end of our module, and that gets us to mastery. The real idea behind dynamic study modules is to get every student to mastery of the concepts in the module itself. So, so we learned to refresh does present all of the learning units in a dynamic study module. Smart refresh gives the students only the questions that they've struggled on and tends to be very short. You can see this smart refresh in this screenshot is only 6 minutes, where a full refresher is 12 minutes. So it's a great tool to study at test time. And remember, those refreshers are always there for students. So I've finished my first round, and now what I'm going to start to see are questions that are new, and also the questions that I did not master in that first round. You're going to see them mixed up. That's part of the algorithm. And you're also going to see, or you saw before, that if I knew a question, I don't get the get it presented to me in the what I need to know sections, and that streamlines it as well. So how do dynamic studies create a unique learning experience? We've talked about this. It's adaptive repetition. We're putting the questions in front of the student at the spacing them out, putting them in front of the student at the time that they should see it to optimize learning on the concepts in the module. And then how do dynamic study modules reward students who accurately assess their confidence? It's really by shortening the time to completion. If students are really working in here and assessing their confidence well and answering honestly, they will get through the module in much faster time than a student who's just trying to blow through it. And why do dynamic study modules withhold the explanation and the correct answer until later? And we've learned that too. That's to give the brain more time to store the information. The idea behind dynamic study modules is partly based on to remember things and store them in long-term memory. It's kind of a cool thing to forget it and have to go find it again. And that's a lot of what's built into that part of DSMs, but also it's the reason that we space everything out and try to put mix up concepts and questions so students aren't seeing the same thing over and over and over again. Which questions are contained in a round, and we've learned that. They're the ones that are, whoops, almost missed that, ones that are not yet mastered. Remember, mastery is answering questions confidently and correctly. And why do we ask questions? Well, really it's to trigger that information retrieval. If a student sees a multiple choice question, not only do they have to answer the question, but they have to assess their knowledge on the answers that we've given them. How can a student who's not familiar with the information complete DSMs more quickly? This is the best one here. I'm actually going to use it. It's I don't know yet. So if you're assigning these before students are coming to class, their best answer for something that they don't know is I don't know yet. Because you've seen, as they go through the questions, they're going to get the information that they need to answer those questions correctly at the time that they need it. So this is a question we had before, and we know that Smart Refresh presents all the learning units. Remember, Smart Refresh is the one that only goes through the questions that the students struggled with. And so here you can see I answered I don't know yet. So I get all the information for answering this question for the next time that I see it. And how do dynamic study modules speed learning? We remember that. It's adapting to prior knowledge. How do we demonstrate that we've mastered a question? And we've gone through that, answering confidently and correctly. If we're not familiar, to go more quickly, this is when we answered I don't know yet before, but we learned it. We're an efficient learner. We are going to say I don't know yet. And so this is one we struggled with a bit, but we know that we have to log into the computer before going to the app. So I have mastered all of the content in this module, and I wanted to remind you that students do have the Refresh and Smart Refresh, but also that as instructors, and we talked about this a little bit, that you have the DSM reporting suite in your My Labs Are Mastering, so you can go in and see how students have answered, how your class has answered, and get some insight perhaps before going to class, see what you should be talking about in lecture, or see perhaps where you might need to review some quiz material or even test material. Students have a review screen. They can see all of the questions and how they've answered, and they can go ahead and drill down and see the full question if they wish. They also have a course report, which is information about how they've been doing in modules. They can see their overall time spent and what the course average is, and can go ahead and drill down into how they've answered the questions and get back to that review screen. So I hope you've learned a lot about dynamic study modules, and I hope that you'll assign them in your course and make fabulous use of them. Thanks.